Well, St. Augustine was, in my opinion, it was completely different than it is today. The first thing I can tell you is that there were a lot fewer people. Inside the city of St. Augustine, I believe, and I'm just spitballing here, but around 3,800 to 4,500 people in the core of the city. And what that meant to me as a kid was I was able to get on my bicycle at 29 Valencia Street and go about 14 blocks down San Marco, and my parents not having to worry about me getting hit by a car. That was number one. It was great. We still like to do crazy things, like go down to the Water Street neighborhood, and we'd get on the wall with the bikes, and then we'd go across the Mission, and we'd pick different areas, different ways to get there, to get here. But we always liked coming out here. And that was the first thing. There were fewer people. Secondly, there were a lot more trees. And we've had some unbelievable hurricanes, starting in my memory with Hurricane Dora in 1964. I was 7 years old, and I remember coming out here, and everything was just completely decimated. All my favorite things, our secret places, and stuff that we used to like to do, they were gone. It was gone, and then, of course, ultimately it was put back together, and you didn't notice anything after that. There was nothing bad. But the hurricanes, Hurricane Francis and others, but that was much later. But San Marco, people don't realize it, but San Marco was one of the main streets for business and commerce. So you had car dealerships, you had auto repair shops, you had a grocery store. There were a lot of things that were, a lot of businesses that were there. And ultimately, let's call it the real US 1, but when US 1, as we know it today, was put in back in the late 50s, early 60s, everything began moving to US 1 and ultimately moved south. I remember when US 1 was, you come down US 1 the way it is now, US 1 turned into San Marco Boulevard. San Marco was US 1. You went down around the fort, and then you made a right-hand turn on Cathedral Place, and then a left on Cordova, and a right-hand turn on King, and it would take you out to Old Moultrie Road and Old Dixie Highway. It took, everything seemed like it was so far away. Everything seemed like it was so far away, because you had no stoplights and 2-lane roads, and it just seemed like it just took forever to get places. But those are two of the things I remember, and then of course every Sunday you had dinner and visiting times. So people spend a lot more time together as families and kind of staying in touch with folks. It's just that doesn't get done as much as it used to be. People tend to use, and I have my phone around somewhere. I'm always trying to figure out where my phone is, but people are using phones a lot more. People used to write letters, and things we studied were a little different than today. But tourism, when I was growing up, and I can go way back, but I'll just say from the 1960s on, you had two very distinct seasons. Winter season, which was about 2 weeks before Easter and 2 weeks after Easter, and then you had the summer season from June until Labor Day. And they were distinct in that that's when you got your big rush. If you had hoped to make it to the next year, you had to save your profits, save money to get through the slow times of fall and winter. And even as late as 1986, in 1986 I was 29 years old, and that's when I took over the gift shop. We had days where the park would have fewer than 50 people come in. And we had employees, we had between 9 and let's say 14 employees at any given time. It wasn't until the late 80s, early 90s that we hit the maximum of 19. That was a sort of a government cap number that if you went over 19, then you had to, you fell under more scrutiny, more regulation. And we chose to keep it at our accountant's advice, our trustees' advice, to everything below 19. Of course, that's changed now, and you can have, I believe, up to 50. So we currently have 37 employees. But tourism, with those two distinct seasons, you had to plan for layoffs. There truly were seasonal employees. And when you had those seasons, that meant that restaurants closed up. You had some hotels that closed up. They just closed up because there really wasn't anyone here. So, it made planning very difficult. If you had an early hurricane and you got wiped out, you might have to go to the bank and borrow money. I mean, we had lines of credit where if we had a bad summer or a bad winter season or bad spring season, we pretty much would have to go and borrow the money and just to try to keep the doors open. And
you don't have slow times now?
I have to tell you, no, we really haven't. There've been a number of things that have happened, and I'll just take you back to like the 1950s, late 50s, early 60s. A guy named Joe McClure Sr. Started the St. Augustine Train Company, and I don't know if that's what it was called at the time, but they were the red trains, and that helped. That began to help bring people to all the different attractions that were here. It was just went all around the town. You had an hour tour, and it was like giving you the table of contents of our town. That was the first thing. The second thing that you got your really big shot on the arm was, and you got to understand that between that time and the time that the Visitors Convention Bureau formed, there was this mentality. And the mentality was that you had a fixed pie, that there were only so many people that were going to come to St. Augustine. And of those people, we all had to fight for our share of that pie. How they got here was irrelevant, and we were deemed, because everything was so small here. Individually, no one person could handle the load of marketing the destination. Now, my grandfather, in the old days, the 40s, the 30s and the 40s, he would send people up US 1, 441, all the way as far as the roads went up. And we would take these handbills, these Fountain of Youth to St. Augustine, Florida. And then Granddad was the one who, when he was serving in the Florida Senate, was the first politician or the first person in the state of Florida to arrange to have public money spent on marketing dollars to bring people to the state of Florida. So you still had all of this. Oh my God! Well, it's only going to be this big. And I remember this because when I moved back to St. Augustine in 1986, I served on the St. Augustine Attractions Association board, and began learning about the Visitors Convention Bureau and the Tourist Development Council. My sister Elaine had convinced me that this was a good thing to start. And she and Charlie Lassiter and there were a number of other folks that got together, and they said, this is what we're going to do. And this was, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago, I guess it was. As soon as they were formed, not almost immediately, but everything started to turn up. Visitation started to turn up, albeit slightly, and it continued to grow and grow and grow for about 10 years. And then all of a sudden you had 9/11. And you would think that on that day, I was scared. I'll be honest with you, I was scared to death. We were just starting a major project down on St. George Street. We were supposed to break ground the next day on the 12th. And we had family discussions, and after those discussions, it was deemed that we're going to take the risk and then and hope and pray that everything is going to work out. But what it did was we had 2.5 months of the worst attendance, or the worst attendance and visitation that we've had for 25 years. And then all of a sudden in December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, we had the best visitation that we had ever had, ever. You could see people lying in the streets. It's because nobody wanted to fly. People were scared to fly, so they got in their car and they drove. And as people drove and the word of mouth got out that, St. Augustine is a really beautiful place, more and more people started to come. Then social media. And social media is a double-edged sword. Social media, which is, has been used many times to try to thwart business, to say, oh, I had a bad meal, the restrooms weren't clean, or whatever. If you treat it as an opportunity to see where your weaknesses are and you improve them, then more and more people will find out that you've got a good thing and business will increase. And not only that, you can reach millions of people now instead of thousands of people for a relatively low cost. And that was another very, very big factor, the social media, that helped us. And we were able to, I guess at the end of the 90s, this is the 2000s. I guess the 2000s is really when we felt that. And since that time, I guess the other big event would be the Nights of Lights. And the Nights of Lights, which incidentally I think was brilliant, no pun intended, but I think that was a great idea to bring people into town during a traditionally slow season. And so, in answer to your question, there are no slow times. I can tell you that the first 2 weeks of January before Martin Luther King Day, those are our slowest times, along with the first 2 weeks of September after Labor Day. Other than that, even if you have a bad week, there's always the weekend. Seriously, you have hope. That's the great thing. You have hope. Every week you have hope. If you need money to pay your rent and you have a small store on St. George Street or a restaurant on the Bayfront, you have hope that the weekend is coming and that you will be able to make enough money to pay the rent, keep the lights on, pay your employees, pay your vendors. And that's the one thing that we have now that we did not have back in the winter and the fall, back before, and again, 1986 is when I took over, so let's say before 1990.
What are some other effects of that growth in tourism?
Well, the positive effects are obvious. You certainly have more restaurant choices. Growing up here in St. Augustine in 1960, I specifically remember 3, maybe 4 restaurants. You had Marty's, you had Osteen's, you had Pappy's, you had South Seas, a couple others. There was no one was willing to take a chance on a really good restaurant. And when I say good, I'm talking about, I guess, fancy, because I love fried shrimp. I love French fried potatoes. I love fried fish. I love all that stuff. But if you wanted to get a good steak, or you wanted pork, or you wanted something like that, you had to go to Jacksonville. And I remember my dad driving us all to Jacksonville to go to Charcoal Steakhouse or go to the University Club. In St. Augustine, you had the Ponce de Leon Motor Lodge, and it was great, but it was one place, and you couldn't go there 3 days a week or 4 days a week, or it's just what you wouldn't do. That would be one of the positive. Well, repeat that question one more time.
Just some other effects of the growth in tourism here. And you talked about a couple of positive things, like more choices, and it's good for businesses because it helps you earn money, but just on the town also.
Well, that's a tough one, because you got businesses. With the increase in business, you have to have employees. Employees have to have a place to stay, and of course it begets more business. They have to have something to eat. They have to have a place to stay. The business cycle being what it is, as the number of employees went up, business is slow to create new housing for employees, lower income housing, because really and truly it's about a $15 an hour town. Now, I know what the statistics say, and the statistics say that the median income here in St. Johns County is $67,000. Now, I don't know if a lot of those folks work in Jacksonville, and I know we have a big law community and a physician community, and perhaps that's maybe bumping up the amount, but really and truly, most of the folks who work in the service industry, and about 14,000 folks that do that, it's about a $15 an hour town. So you have this strain on lower income housing, low cost housing, that it's just difficult to get caught up. And as business goes up, the need for public services, greater police, fire, government, just government in general, to handle the larger group of people, which means budgets go up, which means taxes go up. As taxes go up, then the price of housing has to go up. It has to, because you got to pay taxes. It's the same thing here. In any attraction or any business, you got to pay taxes. So you have to raise prices in some way, keep costs down, and that's it. So that's one of the negative things. You could say that traffic. Here's the funny thing: you could say that traffic is a bad thing, but I will tell you something about that. It's kind of interesting. This is just one piece of, and this is the St. John's Business Journal. This is from 1991. Now, I could go to the St. Augustine record and you give me a few hours, and I could go back to the 1950s, the 1940s, and 1930s, and I can show you where there's a traffic problem and there's a parking problem. And let's see here, 1991, downtown parking important to local merchants. Imagine that. You know, I concur, just like every generation has concurred. So what are we going to do about it? We've got a little spit of land here stuck between two pieces of water, two bodies of water. What are you going to do? There are things that haven't been done that, in my opinion, should be done. The big parking lot, the big municipal parking lot behind the Lightner Museum, to me, without question, that would be a great idea because you have locals that are using that service. You have employees that are around the Casa Monica, that work for the city, that Flagler College. That right there to me is a no-brainer. The lot, as in its current form, is completely wasted. It's wasted. I know the folks tried to get it built a number of years ago, and then the settlement was, let's build it over there on next to Francis Field, next to the VIC. It's a good lot. It's a good parking lot. They're making money. I think that if you could get the cars off the street and make it a little bit more pedestrian friendly, make it a little bit more car friendly, I think that'd be great. But something has to happen there. The view is that if you build this parking garage, they will come, and I understand the fear on that, and maybe they will come. I don't know. I mean, as a business person, I would hope so. But the thing is, if you have all of these business folks that are taking all the spaces around the square and down every street, it's always going to be crowded. You're always going to have some problems. At least if you build a parking garage and get them out of the way. That's why I don't worry so much about these big hotels. The hotel that Conti's building down here, the old San Marco Hotel, it's going to be a beautiful facility. It's going to be big. I'll admit that. There are differences of opinion on the size of the hotel and the footprint that it's making. But you know what? It's going to pull a lot of cars. It's going to go US 1, it's going to go down Castillo, they're going to park their cars right there, and they're either going to walk, because they're within walking distance of everything, or they're going to end up taking a train or a trolley, which is good. That's what you want. The more trolleys you have out there, the fewer cars you have on the road. I think it's a win-win for everybody. But it is a problem. I'm not saying that it's not a problem. I'm part of it. I drive. But I would challenge folks when they say that the number of visitors is a problem to sit in traffic and look at the tags. I will tell you that the majority of those cars are residents who live here, from State Road 206 all the way inside, all the way up to Palencia, as far west out on 207 and State Road 16. There are a lot of folks that live around here, and it's a lot more than it used to be, and there's only so much land that can be dedicated to roads. That's the problem. Because there's so many people here that think that so much of what is here now has always been here. If you wanted to, the furthest subdivision to the north, let's see, I don't even remember one. It took an hour to get to Jacksonville, Florida on US 1. There was nothing up there. You had the golf club, and then you had nothing to David Johnson's, a little restaurant about 18 miles up the road. And then past that, you had nothing until you got to the area which is now the Avenues Mall. But there was nothing. You go out to the south, and you had on US 1, you're sitting there. The first subdivision down there, I think, was St. Augustine South. The second one was St. Augustine Shores. But gosh, that wasn't until the late 70s and the early 80s. So there was nothing out there. There were no traffic lights. You didn't have businesses. Jack Wilson was a pioneer. Jack Wilson built his dealership out there on US 1 South. And I got to tell you, there were a lot of folks that thought he was crazy. No one had any idea. Now, I guess it was Mr. Chance who had the Oldsmobile place up here, the Cadillac place on San Marco. He stayed for many years after that. He sold his business, and they stayed for many years after that. But I'm going to tell you, there was nothing south. As a matter of fact, there were so few people here that in the late 60s, early 70s, you could go out on State Road 206. You could put a clay pigeon thrower out there. And I remember my father, me, a couple of Dad's friends, they would throw clay pigeons out over the marsh there in Crescent Beach, and we'd shoot them with shotguns. It's not illegal. There was no problem. Nobody lived there. There wasn't anybody on the west side of the Intercoastal, and on the east side, the population was pretty slow. Fred Green, the first He says he was the first Republican in the county. He had a little place down there, but it was on the other side, so he was okay. I go back so far as in the early 60s when I was 3-4 years old. That, I remember our first Easter egg hunt out here, and before we had all the archaeology that exists today. I should say, that is interpreted today. But we used to have a clay pigeon thrower right there. We used to shoot pigeons with shotguns out here, not clay pigeons, with shotguns out here. And it was a different animal. When you went over on the island, I remember that you had a couple of restaurants there. I think Seafarer was there on the right-hand side. You had Osteen's on the right-hand side. Very, 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 very small businesses, small hotels. Very small hotels. Little pizza parlors. There was an A&W root beer there, which was fantastic. It was an outdoor place, and they had a jukebox. And as a kid, we could actually go across the thing. Furthest bank to the west was Barnett, and it was right as you round the corner. It was on the left-hand side. It's where Blue Water Jewelers is now. But once you get past the lighthouse, there's nothing there. 1965, they put in amphitheater. You had the way to get to Anastasia State Park, and then you essentially had nothing down there. The beach road, I remember when it was dirt, when A1A was dirt, sand rather, all the way down. One of my aunts, my great aunt, had a hotel down there called Matus's, and you had these tiny hotels, and then you had nothing all the way to State Road 206, and then you had some big houses down there. I would love to have all of the answers. I will say this, that I'm optimistic that we will have answers and solutions to problems that face the county. And the reason I'm optimistic is because we have more people working together now as opposed to apart. We are not all believing in, as I mentioned earlier, the finite pie. The pie clearly is expanding. It's expanding at a rate that I'm sure that a lot of the residents are not happy about. And I believe that you're going to have people that are going to come up with solutions. I wish that the people that we have elected would focus on infrastructure and how to handle this, and let the tourism people handle what the tourism people are good at. We have a Visitors Convention Bureau to bring people here. That's their job. Don't get on them for doing their job well. Try to figure out how to handle the folks that are here. Focus on what it is here. And I don't know if that involves additional taxation. I don't know if that involves changing the traffic. I'd like to see a 3-lane San Marco and a 3-lane King Street. Would have also liked to have seen a 3-lane bridge. But, the town voted and they wanted a 2-lane bridge. They wanted to put bridge lines back exactly the way that it was. And that's okay, but because I know that it's a 2-lane bridge, and if I decide to go on over that bridge at any time during the day, it could be a 10-minute wait or it could be a 30-minute wait. And if I'm willing to take the risk, then as everybody else apparently is, who knows that that's a 2-lane bridge, then that's what we do. But this is a beautiful place in which we live, and unfortunately, there's no going back to the way that it was. I would love to see more trees. I would love to see San Marco back the way that it was. I'd love to see more South Georgia than South Florida, the way it was when I grew up. But with storms and the increase in population and the growing awareness that St. Augustine is one of the just a great place to visit and live, that genie's out of the bottle, and we're not going back. We're not, barring a natural disaster, we will not be going back. So we have to move forward, and we have to deal with it. We got to make some choices, and we need to keep moving forward. We don't throw up our hands and go, "Oh, we just got to stop people from coming here." No, you're not going to do that.